Welcome to Center Stage. My name is Mark Gordon. On this program, we're going to talk with James L. Reid, the producer of Let Fury Have the Hour. The film looks at how a generation of artists, thinkers, and activists channeled their creativity into an organized response and resistance to the politics that defined American culture in the 1980s.
I had the great opportunity to meet a pretty amazing director and journalist and author, this gentleman named Antonino D'Ambrosio, in New York in, I think, 2008. And he was in pre-production for this documentary and needed a producer. And so I was more than happy to come on board. The film is really kind of spoke to a lot of things that I'm interested in, right? Social justice, human rights, music, art. And he was already bringing to the table some really amazing artists that were already a part of the film. So Shepard Fairey, Chuck D from Public Enemy, some really, really powerful artists. And so it didn't take a lot of time for me to make the decision to sort of come on board and be a part of the film. I think it's important to talk about what the film really is. It's an investigation of a term that Antonino coined called creative response. And he came from an era of... his upbringing was in the early 80s, when there was a time that was, in a lot of ways, really similar to the time frame that we have now, right? So you have the policies at the time in that era was Reagan and Thatcher's policies. Those policies were very much about deregulation, very much about the sort of economic Darwinism that kind of happened, where they started to deregulate unions. Mm-hmm. So in England, it was the miners union. In the United States, it was the air traffic controllers union. And so there was a lot of similarities happening in England and the States at the time. And so what we investigate at the beginning of the film are the artists that responded to those policies. Most prominently would be punk rock, hip hop, street art, and skateboarding. All of those genres of art really spoke to the same kind of idea that coming together and this idea of community is more important than this idea of individualism, which was being promoted by Reagan and Thatcher at the time.
What is it about this subject that resonates with you?
Art is about progress, and art is about this idea that we can come together and divulge truths. Lewis Black is in our films, and he has a hilarious role to play in the film, and really breaks down some of these ideas about trickle-down economics. He says some really great stuff about that, and he almost embarrasses you for being a part of what he's talking about. What was so cool about a lot of his interview is that, there is a big element of that we should be sort of ashamed of ourselves for some of the ridiculous things that we do and how we behave as a culture. We should hold ourselves to a higher standard.
Where'd the title come from?
It's based on the lyrics of a Clash song called Clamp Down. And the full lyrics, if I'm not bastardizing it, is let fury have the hour, anger can be power if you know how to use it. The book that the film is based on is called, the original book was called Let Fury Have the Hour, The Punk Rock Politics of Joe Strummer. And Joe Strummer, was really the pioneer musician of punk rock. The Sex Pistols get probably more attention for, their ostentatiousness, but the Clash was really defined punk as a response to the policies of Thatcher when they were, the economic issues that were happening. That's where it spawned from. And this book that Antonino wrote, just an amazing accumulation of essays and his own writing that take Joe Strummer's work and investigate this idea of world citizenship, right? This idea that we're all connected, this idea that spawned the film and investigates this idea of creative response. And Joe Strummer was really, amongst many other musicians in the scope of human history, was really an icon of that movement of that era.
So do you think art is always a response?
If you take music, you can look at the late 90s and really early aughts, right before 9/11. If you look at the music that was happening at the time, you have Britney Spears, NSYNC, Nickelback. You have these vapidly. If you want to take good art and bad art, good art is responding to issues that are substantial, I guess. But when we have economic, relative economic, support or whatever you want to call it, then you have disco, you have portions of the 80s, with keytars and things like that. And it's not to say that economic issues weren't happening at the time, but you had this you didn't have a huge response to anything that was really prominent. But I think great art comes from some kind of conflict. If you look at the civil rights movement, you had music always came before the marches, right? When people go into battle, they have their songs, they have their flags, they have their horns, So I think across human history, what you find is you have music responding to an issue, and what that does is it rallies the troops. It gets people behind a cause.
Just a reminder, you can hear Center Stage live every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on KXLU Los Angeles, 88.9 FM. We're also streaming live on the internet at kxlu.com. Until next time, this is Mark Gordon, and I'll see you Center Stage.